Hey everybody, this is Steve Monday, Chief Forecaster with Rowan County Weather. Welcome to another edition of the Rowan County Weather Podcast. Today we are delighted to have a special guest with us, Brittany Vanvoorhees with WCNC or NBC Charlotte. As you may know, Brittany is one of the meteorologists on staff with the First Warning Storm team, and we're looking forward to talking weather with her in just a few moments and just some other things as well. Before we get there, though, I'd like to thank our sponsor that makes the Rowan County Weather Podcast possible, and that's William Ryan Enterprises. If you're looking to do home remodeling or construction, and you need to get something done there, those folks can certainly help you. They're located at 1600 North Main Street in China Grove in the old Grove Supply building for context. So, again, stop by and check them out, and they'll be more than happy to help you. You can also scan the QR code you see with the ad on your screen here for more details on William Ryan Enterprises Incorporated. Now, without further ado, let's welcome in our guest today, Brittany Vanvoorhees with NBC Charlotte.
In the early morning hours where there's not a lot of instability, our risk is extremely low here in Charlotte. The same setup earlier in the day would be a different story, so we're thankful for that. Areas of light rain, though, ahead of the main line have started to move in parts there of the Charlotte area, mainly.
Hi, Brittany. Welcome on to the Rowan County Weather Podcast. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thanks so much, Steve. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Brittany, you've been with NBC Charlotte now for a couple of years, actually, and it's been a pleasure watching you. Obviously, I know a lot of the team there from working with Brad and being a member of the First Warning Storm Spotters for really its entire time it's been around. And you guys do a great job. But for folks that don't know much about you off the air, give us some background on what brought you to Charlotte.
So I grew up in Atlanta, and so one of the main reasons why Charlotte was so appealing really was being closer to family. My sister and my brother-in-law have a 2.5-year-old, so my nephew actually was born 19 days, yeah, 18 days after I started at WCNC. So part of the reason why I really wanted to be closer really was because at the time my sister was pregnant. So I was looking definitely to get closer to family. But also I think one of the cool things about living in Charlotte is we do have a lot of challenging weather. We're not in Tornado Alley, but we can be impacted by hurricanes. We can get severe weather like the last few weeks. Of course, Rowan County tornado happened last week.
That's
We had a
right.
tornado in Catawba County earlier this year. And so we get severe weather, but we're not in Tornado Alley. But then you also have the hurricane influence. You get
Hmm.
seasons, even though I'm kind of bummed out it hasn't snowed the last 2 years. But we do get, hot as you know what, but we also do have like the nicer 4-season climate. And I've actually lived in Florida for a lot of the last 15 years or so. And I just needed a break from the heat and humidity and talking about chance of storms,
Yeah.
hurricanes every single day, basically. And I love Charlotte. I love working at WCNC. Our team is awesome. The support from management and Brad, and of course
Hmm.
Larry too, being here almost 40 years is amazing, especially when we talk about weather, but then also climate change stories. And so they've just been absolutely fantastic. And as you can imagine, having someone who's worked in the station for almost 40 years and then someone who just hit 20 years being
Hmm.
Brad, it is awesome to learn from the two of them.
Yes, absolutely. So, what got you into weather? Obviously we all have something that kind of triggers us when we're younger that makes us fall in love with the field. For me, I've talked about this story before with folks, but for me it was Hurricane Hugo, which honestly, you mentioned Larry. That was a big part of Larry's story is being on the air during Hurricane Hugo back in 1989. And that from that moment on, I wanted to do anything I could with weather. So, what kind of got you in love with it?
So when I was younger, I was always told that I was born right after the storm of the century. I was born in March of 1993. And my mom would tell stories about, being at the grocery store, wanting to
Mhm.
go and, pick up groceries. And she was like 8.5 months pregnant. And all the ladies being like, honey, aren't you worried you're going to go into labor during the storm? And she'd be like, well, I wasn't worried until you said something. So that just like hearing that story always fascinated me about just how things could have come together to have such an intense storm. And then when I was in 5th grade, my 5th grade teacher was married to a local meteorologist in Atlanta. And so because of that connection, my Girl Scout troop was able to go tour the station. And I thought it was just obviously cool. Who doesn't? But then also thought it was amazing that she was a female scientist. I mean, this is 20 years ago, and the amount of female meteorologists on air still is less than about 27%. But at the time, it was even lower. So that was awesome. And to be able to combine the fact that I loved math and science and I always had no problem being a nerd.
Mhm.
It was cool that I could do something that I loved, being the science, the math side, and also do something what I consider cool and help a way to help people stay safe, which was
Yeah.
meteorology. And I just think that seeing someone in that role of being a
Mhm.
female in STEM, a scientist, was knowing that if I didn't want to do TV at one point, I could work for the National Hurricane Center, National Weather Service, but just knowing that she had no problems being, a female scientist and being the only
Mhm.
woman on the team and all those things, I think really inspired me. I always tell kids at school talks that I go to, there should be more female scientists. That does not mean there should be less male scientists. It just
Yeah.
means there should be more females. So it's not about less men, it's just about bringing the women up. And it's one of the reasons, actually, those things why I do so many school talks, because I want to not only make kids feel better, about storms and feeling like they have the ability to stay safe, with their own autonomy to stay safe, if their family's not around. I think like latchkey kids and things like that,
Yeah,
who maybe don't
absolutely.
have parents at home, but
Mhm.
also maybe one day I'll be that for
Right.
another woman that wants to eventually be a female scientist. So that's one of the reasons why, or I guess multiple reasons why I wanted to do this.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. You mentioned females in the field, and obviously, I'm a big girl dad. My daughter wants to go into journalism, but I don't want to hold that against her. But she certainly, looks up to a lot of females in the field. Really, that make it on TV, and from a weather perspective, she actually gets kind of excited, as crazy as it sounds, when she does happen to wake up early in the mornings because she's a teenager. And you know how those teenagers are. They sleep as
Yeah.
long as they can when school's not in session. So when she happens to wake up early on like Saturdays or even during the week and she sees, ladies like Ginger Z and Dylan Dreyer that are on the national channels and the morning shows, that excites her to know that they worked really hard to get there. And it's obviously very inspiring to a lot of folks whenever, especially the younger girls, when someone like yourself shows up to do these school visits. And that could be the spark, just like you said, just seeing somebody who's a female that's actually doing it, and it makes you want to get going. Have you ever had any special moment where you went and talked to any school children and thought, man, that kid right there got really excited, and I'm hoping they just carry it with them?
There have been a few times where I feel like there have been kids who are really, really interested in weather and science, and you can tell
Hmm.
that they're asking really good questions, and that
Yeah.
because of that, they're really into this science. I
Mhm.
honestly have done so many of them.
Yeah.
It's hard, honestly, to keep track, but I
Sure.
have had plenty of times where they are. I will say that they love asking questions. And then the
Hmm.
second thing that they love the most is we do the tornado simulator
Yes.
because I have one of the handheld simulators. And then the
Hmm.
third thing they love is I normally, if I can, bring Storm Tracker. And so
Hmm.
they love seeing, this, I always say, Storm Tracker is about tracking storms and letting them know before they come, not after, different, a little bit different than storm chasing. And so
Yes.
because I want them to understand the difference of
Yes.
like before versus after. Not that there's
Hmm.
anything wrong, of course, with chase, but like just the difference in knowing that
Sure.
that's not necessarily what we're doing.
Yep.
And then also showing them all the different cameras. And we have a camera up front where we have a TV in the back where I can turn the camera on and they can like run
Hmm.
around the front. And of course they dance and they do things like that, but it just is another way for them to, I think, connect with us
Yes.
and what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the storm tracker and storm chasing, and that's one of the conversations I always have with kids in schools when I talk with them is, a lot of the kids, and I love Reed Timmer. Don't get me wrong; I think he's doing very important things for for
Yeah.
for meteorology. But a lot of kids get hung up on the fact that they see him drive into these tornadoes, and they think, well, that's what I want to do. And I spend a lot of time explaining to them, look, you have to look at it from like playing hide and seek. If you're playing hide and seek, or tag even, there comes a point where you're the one that's doing the chasing. And what that means is you're behind what you're trying to get to. And I always try to equate that to them, making sure, if you do have a plan on going into storm chasing or anything like that, just make sure that you're always putting yourself out of harm's way, looking into it versus being in front of it with nowhere to go. Um, but I did want to ask you because we're coming up on severe weather season. Obviously, I mean, not that we can't have severe weather any month of the year here in the Carolinas, but certainly as we get into the warmer weather, that's where it really starts to play a factor. Brad, I've seen always gives great advice to kids when he goes to schools and talks about, making sure to grab that bicycle helmet, for example, and things like that. But, what's some of the things you pass along to folks as well in preparing for severe weather?
One thing that I love is the National Weather Service's campaign of When Thunder Roars, Move Indoors. I tell the kids in every single talk, first of all, I make them repeat it back with me, so it's
Hmm.
like a little fun thing for us to do. But, I say, when I was younger, so long ago, they made us count, when we heard the thunder, saw the lightning, they made us
Hmm.
count,
Hmm.
divide by 5. That was how far away the storm was. But
Hmm.
that data in the last 10, 20 years has shown that lightning can strike well out of the center of a storm, 20 to 30 miles in some
Hmm.
cases. So the push for me is don't count. If you are outside, you hear thunder, you see lightning, you need to get inside. And knowing that hopefully they're taking that knowledge and passing it along to their friends, their
Hmm.
family, their siblings, whoever they
Hmm.
live with. I think that's number one, is getting them to understand that. I think that's a great campaign by the NWS, that and
Yes.
with Turn Around, Don't Drown.
Hmm.
I think, and I guess Break the Rip with
Hmm.
rip currents, like all those
Hmm.
things, or Break the Grip of the Rip. All of those things are really important because they're those catchy little sayings that kids especially will remember. And so that's
Hmm.
the number one thing that I try to make sure they know. And then we do the same thing as with that Brad does, is go over tornado
Yeah.
safety. I want to make sure that because we're normally at a school, I want to make sure that they're knowing where to go when they're not just at school, because of course schools go do the drills, and so they know where they're supposed to go in that situation. So we'll go over, what do you do if you're at Target? What do you do if you're at mom and dad's office? What do
Hmm.
you do if you are at home? But we go over every single different scenario.
Hmm.
1-story home, 2-story home, mobile or manufactured home, apartment complex,
Hmm.
because a lot of them assume I live in a house just because
Right.
they see me as an adult, but I don't. And so I tell them I live in an apartment complex. What would you
Hmm.
guys do? Because I also never want the kids who maybe don't live in a traditional
Yeah.
1-story house, for example,
Yeah.
to ever feel like they're getting left out. And a
Right.
lot of kids, especially from when I was younger, a lot of times people didn't want to talk about their specific home situation. So asking
Hmm.
it in a way of saying, what advice would you give me? If you found out I lived in an apartment, or what advice would
Yeah.
you give
Absolutely.
me if I lived in a mobile or manufactured? It gives them like the autonomy to not necessarily talk about their personal situation, but to just
Hmm.
feel like they're being smart and giving it to everybody in the room. And I think that having that more broad perspective and knowing
Hmm.
exactly where you'd go in different situations, plus the fact I was there as a teenager, in a
Yeah.
middle schooler and an elementary schooler in Atlanta. You said it, we can get storms any time of the year.
Yeah.
So I also needed to know what I would do if I was at my best friend's house and there were storms. Because what if I lived in a 1-story home, but they lived in a 2, or they had a basement, or they
Hmm.
lived in a manufacturer, all those things. It's like giving the kids that autonomy and knowledge that they can share it around, but also have it for themselves. So that's like the main two things, is always, anytime you see thunder or hear thunder, see lightning, go inside. And then
Yeah.
2, especially like knowing your safe place. I also always go over the bring your pets with you. Seems
Yes.
silly, but so many people don't think about that.
Hmm.
And I try to explain it to them as if, when you bring your dog in the car, you normally
Hmm.
put them in a car seat. They're like, yeah. Like, do you know why? They normally, are in a car seat, or, if
Right.
it's a bigger dog, making sure that they have their leash on, things like that, or they're
Hmm.
strapped in. And a lot of times they don't know. They've never even thought about it. And I say, well, if something were to happen, God forbid, and you were to be in an accident, and let's say you were unconscious. I use myself as an example. I say, let's say
Sure.
I was unconscious and I was in a car
Hmm.
accident. I would want to make sure that Roger, my dog, was safe. He was strapped
Yep.
in. He, of course, not only was safe from whatever happened, but also in the airbag, but also wouldn't be able to run away and
Hmm.
potentially get hurt. I say it's the same thing. Let's
Yeah.
say, God forbid, something happened and you are in the closet and you have a tornado. And let's say for some reason you're knocked out, your parents are, you don't want your dog to get loose, run away, step on glass. There's like so many things that can happen. So I see pets as a really important part of the family. So I also like to pass that info along too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great you mentioned that. It's interesting because a couple of years ago we actually had a tornado up in the Spencer area here in Rowan County, and a gentleman happened to be at home, and the storm was coming through. He was watching television, actually keeping up with the coverage on air, and all of a sudden his dog comes running through the house and just darts past him. And he said that was uncharacteristic of his dog. And he thought in that moment, I don't know where that dog's going, but I'm going with it. And so he jumped up and ran, and him and the dog actually hid under the stairway of his home. He had a 2-story home. They hid under the stairway of it, and the tornado actually hit the home, and the home collapsed around the stairway. And when they ended up digging him out, one of the firefighters that responded, he said, what made you guys think to get under here? And he explained that situation. He said, my dog ran here, and I just followed it. So it was pretty incredible to hear that
Well, I
story
mean,
when he
heck,
brought.
they're smarter than us.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
absolutely.
smarter than us most of the time. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, fantastic example. Maybe don't even listen to me, listen to the pup.
Yeah, it was great to hear it though. But it's the first thing I thought about when you were mentioning, people making sure, not only do you go somewhere, but make sure to take your pet with you. Because it is interesting. They seem to have a natural barometer to them in some ways. I remember when I was growing up, we had a cat, and back in the 80s when I was growing up, we didn't have the technology we have today to get some of the advanced warning that storms were coming. But this cat would actually go through our house and kind of growl and just be just on edge. And we would always joke around and go, "It's going to storm in probably another half hour or so." And sure enough, like clockwork, a storm would come through. And we just got used to just basing it on the fact that the cat was going to be so worked up before a storm actually made its way in. So,
Yeah, it's like the pressure change, and then you think
yeah.
too, you see like the thunder jackets and thunder
Hmm.
vests and things like that. Of course,
Yeah.
most people buy those because they're trying to make their pet more comfortable. But
Yeah.
if their pet's uncomfortable, it's partially because something's happening.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you mentioned we're talking about animals. I know you're a big animal lover. I am as well. I've seen some of your campaigns that you've done with the Humane Society and things like that. Especially Larry, he's a big animal lover. How important is it for you to be able to get involved with things like that outside of weather?
It's everything. I think that people who get into this industry, they want to help keep people safe, but they
Hmm.
also really want to be good community partners is like the
Yeah.
best way I describe that.
Yeah.
So I have done some stuff with, Charlotte Humane Society, Lancaster SPCA. I was the MC for their big ball back
Yeah.
in late January. I also am a member of the Junior League of Charlotte, so I do a
Hmm.
lot of volunteering with Promising Pages through them. You
Hmm.
kind of get placed and you pick where you want to go. I wanted to do an external placement because I wanted a better way to be able to volunteer. And then, of course, on top of that, that was kind of a connection to the schools that I already had, where I felt like it was just as important to do the school talks and talk about science and weather, but also be able to volunteer with another organization outside that really promotes, reading and stability and mental health resources for kids. So it's kind of a combination. I'm
Hmm.
normally one of those people who, if you ask me to do something, I will try to move heaven and earth to be able to do
Yeah.
it, unless I'm literally on the air. It's like 10
Yeah.
o'clock on a Saturday. I probably can't do that because that's when we're off the air. But I just think that being a good community partner is a really
Mhm.
important part of being in this industry.
Yeah.
And I also think it's great that WCNC does do so many different community partnerships with, Big Clear the Shelters with NBC in the fall, our Magical Toy Drive in December, and then our Scouting for Food in February for the local food banks, because I just think that, again, it's an easy way to give back and also just be able to meet people, because I think human connection is also a really important part of this job. One of my favorite things about Larry, and he will get mad that I say this, but I am not the most outgoing person. I'm what I call an introverted extrovert. Once we're introduced, I will open up, but I'm not
Yes.
just going to walk up to you and be like, "Hi, I'm Brittany."
Hmm.
But when we would be at community events, at the WCNC tent, every person who came up to introduce themselves, Larry would look them in the eye, ask them to repeat their name, shake their hand, and just really hold that eye contact. And you could just tell how much he genuinely cared about every
Yeah.
single person. And not saying I didn't, because of course I did, but I just felt a little
Sure.
bit more uncomfortable with that. But he's like, to me, an inspiration to be able
Yeah.
to really have, like, he is like the epitome of like human connection and community and being a good community partner. And so I really aspire to be that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great person to look up to. I know I've met Larry a few times, especially coming by the station there, and it would amaze me, to go by there because a lot of times I'd get by and like would meet with Brad or something, and it may be 3:30, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and Larry is still there after coming in at like 2:30, and I'm like, how does this guy still have the energy? But the funny part about it was, and I don't mean funny as in like hilarious, but more of a he's still was just as upbeat and nice, just like what you were talking about, as he was. If he walked in at 3 o'clock in the morning full of energy, and it just amazed me because I'm like, I would be ready to go home and go to sleep right now. This guy is still just kicking it.
He really does. And I promise you, he still does that. In fact,
Yeah,
actually, probably about 10 minutes ago, he walked by over to my left. So he's
yeah,
still here. Yeah. I mean, honestly, our entire weather team, like
mhm,
what you see is what you get on air.
yeah,
They're
absolutely.
just as good of people that come across on
Mhm,
TV as they are in person.
yeah,
And like I said before, Chris and KJ, great. But like being able to learn from Brad and Larry since they've both been here for so long has
mhm,
been really, really amazing. The things Brad will teach me and like the
yeah,
random things he knows so much about, like
mhm,
hummingbirds and cicadas and space.
yes,
And it's like you literally tried to be a sponge and soak up every little bit of knowledge you have because
mhm,
Larry knows like everything about Charlotte and
yeah,
like everything about every person, but Brad
mhm,
everything about everything that's like science related. And so he always calls himself like certified weather geek, and like that's so
yeah,
true, but he just knows a lot about everything. Like if you had a
yeah.
science trivia night, like you have to bring Panovich because
Oh
he
yeah,
knows
yeah,
everything.
yeah. You do that, and you're winning the whole thing. That's for sure. So two big events.
Exactly.
Yeah, two big events coming up as we go over the next couple of months. Really, one obviously sooner than the other, and that's you mentioned the cicadas. That's something that's getting ready to happen. So, a lot of folks, and I like what Brad's been kind of doing on social media. There's been a lot of buzz about with some false information out there on what we can expect, and then Brad's been trying to keep it, keep the truer side of it out there. But what's your delivery for folks who are getting kind of caught up on the cicadas, because obviously they're going to be, there's going to be a significant impact here in our area in certain locations.
Yeah, I think that you need to know whether or not the 13 years ago they came
Mhm.
out, it was in where somewhere where you live. I think that we live in a city, especially in the
Mhm.
metro, that
Yep.
so many people are not from here and have,
Hmm.
here probably even since COVID, in the last
Yes.
4 years in
Right.
2020. And so I think just knowing your local area and whether, I mean, of course, look at Brad's our website article and all of the maps that he's posted because he
Hmm.
is finding the truest information, making sure
Yes.
it's out there, but also knowing just if it happened before, because
Hmm.
when you have a cicada group like this that's repeating every so often, normally they
Hmm.
come back to the same areas. And so
Right.
just knowing whether or not the house you live in, the apartment, whatever, had that same, I guess, plethora of them coming out
Yes.
13 years ago, it's probably like that's probably the best information that you can have. I mean, they are and they can be a nuisance.
Hmm.
A lot of people don't like them, but it's going to happen. So I think knowing whether or not they came out last time and maybe just like some tips and tricks as to what people have done to just like manage the them just being around, the noise, whatever it is a good thing to know. And whether or not if you live somewhere where maybe you have like a native tree landscape, things like that, then can be impacted by them.
Hmm.
I would say the experts are the arborists, and like your
Yes.
local
Absolutely.
nursery people at, whether or not it's a local nursery or a bigger one like Pike, like
Hmm.
contact them and find out like do they, eat my hydrangeas? I don't know, I'm just making
Right.
that up.
Right.
I live in an apartment again, so I don't have a garden.
Yeah.
But and knowing like ways that you can kind of safely maybe keep them from being
Right.
impacted. Because of course you would never want to like do something chemical wise, for example, that could then hurt them or your pets or anything
Hmm.
like that. Because we have to remember it's kind of a circle of life. So if you
Yep.
spray something on your weeds even, and then your pet licks it and then they get
Yep.
sick, like it's just a cause and effect. So you just have to like remember those other impacts that you have.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Brad, like I said, knows way more about the cicadas even than I
Mhm.
do, and probably a lot of experts. And so his research that he has over on his Facebook page as well as over on our website has been so not just informative, but also it has been like our biggest hit on our website, I think,
Yeah.
for like the last week because people are looking it up. So that's like another good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know I've had a lot of folks ask me about it. And one of the things I point out too is, you know, what kind of development has happened in your area since the last time they were out. If you've got more, more, I don't want to say housing developments because that's really not it. But if you're living in the city and you've got more concrete now than you had then, that will have an impact on what you might see where you are. But, certainly could have less impact than what you had last time. Like, there's some folks that may be let down by the excitement of it, really, based on a lot of the information out there. So, the other big event coming up,
It's so
obviously,
interesting though, because there's some
go ahead.
people like don't want them at all. Some
Yeah,
people who are so excited. So it's just really
yeah,
interesting. It's almost like when people say like, "Oh, I want a hurricane to come here." You're like, "No, you don't." But
right.
people get excited sometimes,
Hmm.
especially if it's coming close, but maybe it's actually coming here, just because they like the lead up and the science and learning
Oh
all
yeah,
those things. So I feel like cicadas have been similar, where people
yep,
either don't want them to come at all, or they do want them to come at all. But then also the ones who do want them to come probably don't want them to come in their backyard, but they want them to come at least so they can like see them and learn things about them. I
yep,
think what's also shocking is when you hear the term millions, which is
yes,
absolutely true, but you also have
right,
to think like, I mean, there's bigger than ants, but also like it's
right,
millions, but they're also insects. It's not millions of
right,
people, millions of
right, right, right.
insects.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, the other big event coming up, obviously, and I know you weren't here the last time the Summer Olympics took place on NBC, but you're, this time around for Paris coming up. NBC, I know, along with a lot of the other NBC affiliates, or at least NBC Charlotte, along with the other NBC affiliates, has, they really promote this heavily, and sometimes folks are, asked to go there and all that. I remember the last time the Olympics were taking place, there was a crew that was sent out from NBC Charlotte. What's the station doing this year? Are you able to share anything early enough on that for what the plans are for some Olympic coverage this summer?
I don't think that we are personally sending anybody, but I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, yeah,
I know that Ashley Stroline did a lot of cool things when she was actually in Paris a few months
yes,
ago for some
yeah,
of the NBA games.
hmm,
Um, but I don't think that we're sending anybody. I think the excitement really goes around the Olympics to me are something that really brings a lot of people together
hmm,
and people who sit down and they watch and whether it's with mom and dad or
hmm,
grandparents or siblings or whatever. So I think that's like a really cool thing that it makes us like sit down and really watch and enjoy time with each other, but then also I think it renews that feeling of USA and like we're the
yeah,
best country in the world and all those things. I think it really supports patriotism and getting really excited about that.
hmm,
So it brings, I think, a lot of people who, have different religious, political, like whatever it
yeah,
is, like to be able
yeah,
to come together for a common thing that they can be excited about and support
yeah,
the country, which is fantastic in my opinion. And then I also
yes,
think it's a really exciting thing just because you get to see other parts of the world, other parts of
hmm,
the country, other countries, and being able to see different countries perform. I mean, it's a fantastic event. It's the
yeah,
best athletes that you'll have across, the world. But then
yeah,
also it's just cool to really see. I think that like drive for patriotism is like my favorite thing about the Olympics. So
yes, definitely. Well, before we wrap up, I always like to ask a couple of questions that don't really relate to, what we've talked about. And they're basically just kind of quirky questions in a way. But so the first one I'll ask you is if you had the option to be able to choose a superpower that you could personally have for yourself, what would that superpower be?
this is actually a question I feel like I get a lot. A lot of people will always say reading people's minds. I don't think that I
Mm,
need to know every single thing that someone thinks in their head.
yeah.
I want to say fly just because I think it'd be really cool
Yes.
to be able to quickly get to other places. I
Yeah.
haven't been able to travel even just in the country, but also across the world as much as I have wanted to because just really financial. I mean, I just can't afford it. I'm still
Sure.
young.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of money. But I
Yeah.
think that would be really cool to be able to fly and be able to see other like parts of the country and other parts of the world, or
Hmm.
probably be able to like have some kind of superpower where you could like bring people together. I don't really know
Yeah.
what that would be,
Hmm.
but I don't know, maybe like talk to ghosts with, unfinished business or
Oh, yeah.
something that you want to
Yeah.
help them move on or something like that. I don't know. I don't even know if ghosts are real, but I listen to a
Yeah.
lot of like ghostly and like true crime
Yes.
podcasts and things like that. And I've always
I do
loved
too.
Forensic Files and Dateline and all those
Hmm.
things. My best friend just had her second baby, and she told me that she thinks that other than her and her husband's voice, that she thinks that her child has heard Keith Morrison and Lester Holt's voice more than any other person. Just because she listens to Dateline, it's like
Right.
she's like doing laundry and stuff around the house because
Yeah.
she's still on maternity leave. And I'm like, that is me and us as a friendship to a T. She's my best friend from high school. So we've been best
Yeah.
friends for like 17 years. But I think that would be cool too. You know, anybody who has something, I don't know, unfinished business, heck, even just being able to know like who committed some crimes and, you know, help them
Yeah.
out. It's like Medium, you know, that movie, that show that Patricia Arquette was in, where she like helped the local police, you
Yes.
know, talk to.
Yeah.
It's like some like that would be cool. I think flying is number one, but that would be
Yeah.
number two, just because I love true crime
Yeah,
and Dateline.
absolutely. Yeah,
And then
definitely.
maybe Lester and Keith Morrison would let me be a guest on Dateline, which would be
Oh, there
even
you go.
better.
Yeah, that would be cool. No, I'm a avid subscriber to the Dateline podcast and stuff. So you're
Me too.
speaking my language there. Yeah.
Oh,
Ab-
I'll listen like while I'm like curling my hair, like
Yeah.
doing my makeup at like 6 a.m. on Saturday and Sundays.
Yeah. There's plenty of days I get up and can't find anything to do, and like, might be just miserable weather-wise outside, and I'm stuck inside, and I go, well, I guess I'm going to put it on Peacock and put it on the Dateline Marathon channel and just watch them repeatedly. So I understand that. It's funny you mentioned
And
flying
it's funny
because
because there's so many stories.
yes,
There's so many
yes,
stories too, because like that even if you've watched it or heard it before, it sometimes can feel like a new episode. Then you'll get like halfway in, you say, this sounds familiar, but it's always like meeting something new. It's like forgetting every single time and getting to listen to something new.
yeah, definitely. It's funny you mentioned flying because I was thinking during the eclipse last week how it would be cool to, they were showing like a plane flying with it as far as it could. I thought, man, that would be neat to just fly right along with it. That's
Yeah. Me in my like Supergirl outfit, just like flying across right along with the plane, just making sure everybody's safe.
there
I
you
also
go.
want to
That's
see the
right.
eclipse.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
What?
probably if I could ever do something in my career that I have not been able to do that I would love to do is fly with the hurricane hunters. That's like a
Oh,
career
yes,
bucket. So
definitely. Absolutely. What would be if you had a choice to get just one food for the rest of your life, what would be the food you'd pick out?
mac and cheese.
Mac and cheese. I love it. Yeah, definitely.
I have loved
Definitely.
macaroni and cheese since I literally came out of the womb and it has not
Yeah,
changed and I am 31 years old. So
that's awesome. All right. So the last question for you before we wrap up, if on a day where you get to just have a me day, what does Brittany Vanvoorhees like to do for herself when there's nothing else she has to do for the entire day?
I normally get up, take my vitamins, crack a Diet Coke, go to the gym, and then probably go home and just relax. I am so go, go, go all the time
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
honestly find it hard to relax. My friends will
Mhm.
tell you that they've probably never seen me relax before. But if I could, it would be go home after the gym, take a nice little bath, lay down on the couch with my dog Roger, and probably watch some Forensic Files or Daylight
Yeah. Perfect day. Perfect day.
and just chill.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Brittany Van Voorhees, thank you so much for joining us. For everyone that's watching, if you haven't followed her on, I have to get. I'm still trying to make myself get used to saying X. I still want to say Twitter, uh, but
Me
if you
too.
haven't
I
if you
say
haven't
Twitter all the
followed
time.
that, I do too. So if you haven't followed her on the on Twitter or X or whatever you like to call it, she's at Weather Brittany. You're also on Facebook and Instagram as well. So certainly give her a follow. She's got some great things that she puts on her social pages, especially weather related and things like that. But Brittany, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you, Steve. I loved being here. So let me know if you ever want me to come back.